Hello, hello. Welcome to the Wellness on Purpose podcast, where our intention is to provide you with impactful, educational, and realistic information to help you progress on your journey to live wellness on purpose now and for future generations. This podcast shares insights to current health trends with industry and brand leaders in the health and wellness world. This podcast is brought to you by Joanne's Place Health Foods from Peterborough and Lindsay, Ontario. My name is Marissa Lachlan. I'm a holistic nutritionist and functional lab practitioner. I've been working alongside Joanne's Place for the last 8 years, and I'm so excited to continue to be your host for this podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. You have likely read the title of today's episode, and if you're still here, you can resonate with the conversation that we're going to be having today. And I think it's so important to be talking about this conversation because I am seeing more and more women in my practice that are suffering with hormonal imbalances at all ages, but we're seeing a lot of people come into the store looking for natural alternatives to hormone replacement therapy. And we're going to dive into it. So I've asked actually Dr. Mary Nagai, who is the Director of Medical and Scientific Affairs at Platinum Naturals, to join us for today's podcast. And I'm really excited to have Dr. Mary Nagai to discuss this topic because she is a wealth of knowledge. She holds an MD and a PhD from the University of Toronto, and I've heard her speak at different conferences in the past, and she's just so knowledgeable and she's so relatable and so down to earth, and it's just going to be an amazing episode. So I'm so excited for you guys to be here and really learn about more of a natural approach to managing menopause and also helping you understand what it actually means to be in menopause and how you can better support your body through your lifestyle and diet to help mitigate some of the symptoms that are associated with menopausal changes. So without further ado, join me in welcoming Dr. Mary Nagai onto the podcast. Hello, Dr. Mary Nagai. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and it's such an honor to be able to record this podcast and share my knowledge with everyone out there.
Thank you. I'm so excited for this podcast episode as well because we're going to be talking about menopause. And this is probably the most common conversations that we're having in store amongst our community. And I really want to take this time to provide some educational tools for our customers and our community on how to support their menopausal symptoms. So before we talk about what they can do, can you start by talking actually a little bit about yourself and who you're here with Platinum Naturals and a little bit about Platinum Naturals as a brand?
Sure. So I'm the Director of Medical and Scientific Affairs for Platinum Naturals, and I'm their educator. And my function at Platinum Naturals is to share with our consumers and with our internal staff about what natural supplements can do and what good formulations bring to your lifestyle and help you stay healthy and lead a high quality of life. And Platinum Naturals is very dear to my heart because they formulate products using healthy oils that help deliver the nutrients to your tissues, not just help absorption, but help deliver the actual nutrients to the tissues and their targets.
That's amazing. And I think it's so important to highlight that because there's so many options for supplements in the market. But what really stands out about Platinum Naturals is their formulations that have been researched in depth, but also the way in which they're transported through the body using the different oils. So I love that. And we're going to talk about some of those formulations today. But before we get into product specifics, let's touch on menopause and discuss what's actually happening hormonally when a woman hits menopause.
So when a woman hits menopause, it can be anywhere from as early as their 30s to their mid 50s. And some people don't even enter menopause till their 60s. And what happens during this time, it's a gradual change. So some women don't even notice that these changes are happening slowly until they miss their period or their periods start to become more irregular and they develop other symptoms that we'll talk about as we go on this podcast. But what happens during this period of time is the amount of estrogen and progesterone that your body produces in that cyclic manner every month begins to drop off. And there's a large drop in progesterone. And it's this drop that is responsible for the symptoms of menopause.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit more specifically about what those symptoms would be so that our listeners could maybe identify if they are in that menopausal state?
Sure. So the most common symptom that women, I guess, feel that something's happening is when their periods become irregular and when their periods stop. This usually occurs, like I said, somewhere between their 30s to mid 50s or later. The average age is 45 to 55. But we do know that some women enter it earlier if they're underweight or they smoke. They enter menopause earlier and they start to have that irregular period, or if they're overweight, they can enter menopause later. But often before their last period, they develop hot flashes or flushes, and they might have like one and then two, and then like just very infrequent. And then they're wondering what's happening. That's the one of the first signs that they may be entering menopause. And it usually happens, typically starts before a woman's last period, about 2 years or less. And they may experience an increased heart rate. Like they might feel like their heart is like jumping out of their body when they have this hot flash. Or they may start to get dizzy and they wonder, wow, this has never happened before. And when it first happens, they might not attribute it to the onset of menopause, but as it becomes more frequent, then they start to think, oh, this is a hot flash. They start to feel hot and sweaty, and then the associated heart palpitations and dizziness, and then they kind of put everything together. They might get night sweats. They might experience vaginal dryness, and for some women, their pelvic muscles start to relax, and when they cough or sneeze, they might have a little bit of leakage of urine. So that is sometimes women don't associate that with menopause, but it is a symptom of menopause. Sometimes women, particularly when I'm in the stores, people say, "Oh, do you know what I can do for my numbness or tingling or my pins and needles feeling in my hands and feet?" And for some, it may be associated with menopause because there is a heightened sense of sensitivity. For others, it might be a sign of early diabetes or a vitamin deficiency. But for many, it starts with menopause. They might experience increased facial hair growth or thinning of hair on their scalp. And that thinning of hair on the scalp is very common. And then they might experience some fatigue, irritability. They might have difficulty sleeping because of these night sweats. And for many, weight gain is associated with menopause, but it's also associated with aging. So it's kind of a symptom that can be associated with many aspects of aging. And then for many women, they start to lose their breast fullness. So those are the big ones that people notice, and there's a lot of minor ones as well, but those are the big ones that people notice.
It's so interesting, like how many things that hormonal changes can affect. There's so many symptoms and so many other bodily functions that are impacted that a lot of women and individuals are not even aware of. So when women are transitioning through menopause, is there an average time of how long it will take to go through menopause, or would you say it's very different for everybody?
So it's very individual. Sometimes they have an idea how long it might last, or when they might start, or when it might end, based on what happened to their female siblings, their mother. But typically it lasts about 7 years, but it can be as long as 14 years.
Wow, that is quite a long time. And there's so many things that impact that. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that, diet, lifestyle habits, things like that. But for women that are transitioning through the menopausal state and they are experiencing some symptoms, why is it that some women experience such a high level of symptoms versus some women you hear don't experience any menopausal symptoms at all?
And that's a really good question. And it's something where we don't have the answers to yet. It's not related to family history. It's not related to lifestyle. And we know it's not related to people's medical histories. We just don't know why it's so variable.
Okay, good to know. Um, what about the liver? How important is the liver during the menopausal state for women? Do we need to prioritize liver health? Is it something that can just be managed on its own? What are your thoughts for liver support?
So, liver support for menopausal women is really important because when our heart rates go up, when we're experiencing hot flashes, night sweats, all of those conditions or symptoms that I just mentioned earlier, they all create or are producers of free radicals. Anytime your temperature goes up, your heart rate increases, there's a risk of more free radicals being produced. And because menopause is associated with aging, estrogen deficiency, again, is associated with aging, with menopause. Together, they are both associated with mitochondrial dysfunction, something we call cellular senescence, where cells go into a state where they resist dying and they produce a lot of free radicals. They have more mitochondria than your average cell. They're not nice shaped, but most importantly, they produce this secretin called senescence, a senescence factor. And this factor, when it goes out into your circulation, induces inflammation, which, as we all know, inflammation is associated with increased free radical production. And as we age, particularly through menopause, there's an imbalance that can develop between your antioxidant formation and the oxidative stress. And we all know that the liver can be very affected by too much oxidative stress and not enough antioxidant formation. So your liver health is really important. And one of the important things to just be aware of is that we are now finding that more and more people, particularly women going through menopause, are at risk for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Fatty liver disease was always associated with people who drank too much or consumed, were on too many medications, or there's some liver disease going on. But now we know that you can have a very healthy lifestyle and still develop non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And only recently did we associate an increased risk with menopause. So taking care of your liver is really important.
Wow, it's so great that there's still a lot more research going on as to, trying to navigate what is causing what comes first, what has an impact on the rest of the body. So that's great. I mean, liver support, I think at any age is really crucial, even menstruating women. So many things are filtered through the liver. It's just really that housing organ that we need to be mindful of. Now, I want to go back to one of the symptoms you mentioned for menopause, and that is weight gain, because you mentioned that is a symptom, but also that's a symptom of aging as well. But for women going through menopause in particular, why is it so common for weight gain to occur during this time?
So weight gain is a very common feature or symptom of menopause. Not only is it because we're going through menopause and we have all these hormonal changes, but it's also because of aging. And as you know, as we age, not just for women, but for men as well, our muscle mass typically decreases and our fat content increases. And the rate at which we lose muscle mass is reflective of our lifestyle. Are we upping our physical activity? Are we walking? Are we just moving? Any type of movement helps us stave off muscle mass loss. But it also helps you maintain a healthy weight, because as we age and we go through menopause, our metabolism slows down as well. And as your metabolism slows down and we don't move as much, it's called 1 plus equals 3. It's inevitable you're going to gain weight if you don't watch what you eat. So it's important to it's not so much how much you eat, it's what you eat. So it's important that as you go through menopause, you're very careful of making sure you get enough fruits and vegetables, still eating protein, whether it be red meat, white meat, fish, or if you're a vegetarian or vegan, making sure you're getting enough protein through sources like nuts and other high protein sources like soy and just to mention a few. But it's really important that you maintain your activity, your social life, and your cognition plays a big role, right? How happy your brain is all plays into your helping to maintain a healthy metabolism and watching that your lifestyle overall is healthy. And that includes what you eat.
Yes, those are some really great points. So we're going to talk about some diets in just a minute, but that tends to happen, and I see this so often. Women that are going through menopause, they restrict calorie intake, or they change the way they eat, or they stress eat. There's so many things that happen during that time as well. But before we talk about food, I want to talk about sleep, because this tends to be interrupted for most women because of night sweats, hot flashes, things like that. So what type of impact is a proper sleep routine have for a menopausal woman?
So you're absolutely right. Disrupted sleep can trigger hot flashes. And people often think that hot flashes trigger people waking up, but it can be both. And during menopause, even post-menopause, it's really important as we age that we get a good night's sleep, because your sleep can definitely have a mark on how happy you are, how sad you are, how irritable you are. Your whole social lifestyle can be impacted by not getting enough sleep and not getting quality sleep. Because for some people, it's not quantity, it's really quality sleep that's important. So, particularly during menopause, it's the quality of that sleep that you're getting.
With the sleep, I mean, there's so many things that can impact that as well. But sorry, I guess sleep have such an impact on so many other things. So even if you're you're listening to this podcast, you're not going through menopause, it's a great thing to prioritize, especially if you're on that, track to hitting menopause. It's a good thing to start prioritizing before that happens, which is good. That's great. So we've talked quite a bit about some lifestyle factors, some symptoms. I want to ask your professional opinion on some wellness trends that I see often suggested on social media for menopausal women. And these are typically coming from practitioners that are just providing information, but I would love to know what your take is on them. There are three things that I want to talk about: intermittent fasting, weight training, and then low carb diets. So let's start with talking about intermittent fasting. Do you feel like this is supportive for specifically menopausal women, or do you think it's kind of a hyped up wellness trend?
So I think intermittent fasting, if it works for your lifestyle, it's a healthy way to maintain your weight and ensure that you're eating properly, because people who tend to do intermittent fasting are very cognizant of what they're eating and when they're eating. And what's nice about intermittent fasting is you don't eat before you go to bed. And that, for me, is one of the reasons why people can't sleep, because after you eat, you're not supposed to lie down, you're not supposed to rest. You can sit up or walk around, exercise a bit, but you need to move to help your food digest. If you're eating right up until you're going to bed, then people tend not to sleep as well. So it impacts your sleeping. So I believe, and I've seen it, and I've actually tried it myself, that intermittent fasting can promote a healthier lifestyle. And there's many ways in which you can intermittent fast. So you have to find the recipe for intermittent fasting that works for you. And it is quite a sustainable lifestyle. Cutting out carbs or reducing carbs or having low carb diet, for some people it works, for some people it doesn't. And, it's something that can be really hard to maintain for people because they have those sugar cravings and those carb cravings. And the worst thing to do for to try and maintain a healthy diet is to have those cravings. So if it's a lifestyle change that works for you, then try it. It's like for any diet, try it. The most important thing is if you're going to make a change to your eating habits, make them healthy ones, but make them sustainable so that it can be part of your lifestyle. And then you'll you'll be more successful. And just like increasing physical activity, yeah, it's really important that you do that, but make sure it's sustainable. So you can try anything, but always evaluate what you're doing, not just from an eating standpoint or a weight standpoint, but overall. Are you happier? Is it sustainable? Are you able to connect and stay connected with friends and family? Right?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you touched on that because I always try to remind people is that stress really is the underlying burden to so many health concerns, whether we're talking menopausal symptoms, whether we're talking about hormones, doesn't matter what we're talking about, but whatever you just do decide to do, no matter what you're trying to achieve, whether that's hormone balancing, cardiovascular, whatever that is that if it's causing more stress, more agitation, more, mood fluctuation, feeling like you're missing out, it's not doing what you want it to do because you're still having a negative emotional attachment that's connected to that. And that's a whole other conversation that we could go into.
Yeah.
But it's really important to know, yes, there's times and places for different things, the treats or the drinks or going out with your friend, because the social aspect of your life is also so incredibly important. And we know, I think, more now than ever, the quality of your life is physically, but it's also emotionally who you involve yourself with. And that's a huge part of a healthy lifestyle as well. So I'm happy that you touched on those. And with physical activity, weight training, I see this recommended so often for menopausal women. And I think personally, it's incredibly supportive for the longevity of your health, strengthening your bones, your muscles, maintaining that muscle mass as long as possible. Would you say the same? It's a great thing to have for menopausal women in their routine?
Absolutely. So we know that people love to swim, but it's not weight bearing. And it doesn't help sustain healthy bones. It helps sustain a healthy heart and healthy mind, but your bones are not in the strength of your bones is not supported by swimming. But weight training, even lifting those little dumbbells like with your arms or even walking with ankle weights definitely supports longevity, supports the health of your bones, and that's so important for women.
Yes, I agree absolutely. Now, let's talk a little bit more about what is often recommended in terms of taking medications or supplementation for menopausal women. Now, we see this so often. Women are coming into the store. They have been recommended to take HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy. Maybe they're already started it, or they're coming in looking for an alternative, or if there's a naturally derived HRT. So I would love to know what you think is most important for women to know before choosing the route of taking hormone replacement therapy.
Okay, so many years ago, hormone replacement therapy was the go-to for every woman. And just like so many things in medicine, after all the clinical trials deemed it to be safe, we start using it in the general population, and we start to see that it's not as safe as we thought it was. And we now know that hormone replacement therapy is not for everybody. Okay. And for many reasons, it could be because of their family history, their personal history, they may have a history of cancer that's associated with estrogen receptor positive cancers. So hormone replacement therapy is not for everybody. And it's really important that before you start that journey, that you have an in-depth discussion with your healthcare provider and you discuss the risks of taking hormone replacement therapy and the benefits of taking it. And then you go back to your home, you think about what you've been told, you read about it, because when you're told about it the first time, I think people's retention of all the information is about 10 to 15%. So you need to have the discussion, do your own reading on the internet, right? And I know a lot of doctors do not like the internet for that reason, but personally, I like it when my patients go to the internet, do their own reading, and come back to me and say, I found this, and can we discuss this? And I'm more than happy to discuss information my patients find on the internet, because that way I know what they're reading, what their sources are, and we can have a more personal and in-depth discussion about decisions, particularly because hormone replacement therapy is an option. It's not a must do, it's an option. So anytime management of any condition is an option, it's really important that all the cards are put on the table and you are fully aware of the risks and benefits, but also what other people have said about their experience on that journey.
Yes. And what we know, as we've talked about for other points on today's podcast, is every single woman out there is so individualized. There's so many different things that come to play, whether it's lifestyle, predispositions to other health concerns, what they're trying to achieve, what they have available to them, what's accessible to them as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm the same. I love when people come in, I've seen this on, say, a TV show, or I've seen this in the paper, I've seen this on the internet. What are your thoughts? Can you provide some insight or an alternative to that? And we know there's a lot of different options out there. So what do you recommend for women when they are looking to manage menopausal symptoms from more of a natural perspective?
So when looking at managing menopause symptoms from a more natural perspective, I like a holistic approach, and I like to know what their symptoms are, because there are two ways in which you can approach menopause symptoms. One is the hormonal, and one is the neurotransmitter pathway. So some women like black cohosh, they've tried it. Black cohosh works on the neurotransmitter pathway, on the serotonin, to help counter your hot flashes, your night sweats, but it works on the serotonin pathway. It doesn't touch the estradiol pathway. So it works for some women. For some women, it certainly staves off their brain fog and their mood swings and their hot flashes and night sweats. But for others, it might work initially, but then it stops working. And for some women, it doesn't work at all. My favorite is to use a phytoestrogen like eucommia or mung bean, because these phytoestrogens bind to the beta estradiol receptor. And the beta estradiol receptors are found in your brain, your bone, your heart, your liver, all those key organs, but it's not found in your ovaries, your uterus, your mammary tissue. So it's much safer because it's not promoting, or studies have not shown that they increase the risk of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, but it definitely helps to supplement the areas of your body where it was used to getting estradiol, but now it's not. So your brain has lots of beta estradiol receptors. So does your bone and your heart. And we all know that as we go through menopause, our risk of heart disease elevates to what it is in our male counterparts. And that's because those beta estrogen receptors aren't getting fed. And our risk of osteoporosis goes up because those beta receptors in our bone aren't being fed. So for me, I like those phytoestrogens that come from mung bean and eucommia, to name a few. Nuts, flaxseed has them as well, has those same phytoestrogens. And so they're wonderful to help manage not only your menopause symptoms, but the health of your heart, liver, lungs, bones. Wonderful. And at the same time, these phytoestrogens also help control the amount of serotonin. So it helps with your mood swings, just like black cohosh would, or taking, some women who are menopausal go on SSRIs because they need to control their mood swings, their depression, their mental health. Phytoestrogens help in that sense because they help boost or maintain healthier serotonin levels. So these phytoestrogens work in both the neurotransmitter and your hormone system. And what's really nice is these phytoestrogens have an adaptive effect. So just like adaptogens, the more you need them, the more they're there for you. The less you need them, they pull back. And studies have shown they're 70 to 90% effective.
That's amazing. So, with the phytoestrogen approach, which targets the neurotransmitter pathways as well as the hormone receptors, as you've said, this is the approach of the MenoThrive, correct?
It is.
Okay, can you talk a little bit more about this product in terms of, what's unique about it from Platinum Naturals?
Sure. So MenoThrive uses eucommia bark extract and mung bean. And these two sources of phytoestrogen have long been used in Chinese medicine to manage menopause. It's like an ancient recipe. And as I mentioned, mung bean and eucommia bark extract are both phytoestrogens, and they help maintain your heart, bone, and cognitive health, as well as alleviating your menopause symptoms. And what's nice about MenoThrive is all of the phytoestrogens are also emulsified or suspended in pomegranate seed oil. And pomegranate seed oil only recently has been shown to be effective because it's recently been studied to help manage menopause. Because pomegranate seed oil is the only plant that has the highest concentration of punicic acid. And punicic acid, in and of itself, helps alleviate hot flashes, but also in its own right, it manages vaginal dryness, which is really nice. But it also helps sustain the bioavailability of mung bean and eucommia. So it's a really nice delivery system to help deliver these nutrients to your target tissues.
Amazing. And as a pomegranate naturally occurring would have some antioxidant properties as well for that free radical balance that you talked about earlier, correct?
Absolutely, yes. And what's
Awesome.
nice about this product is it's individualized. So if you have mild symptoms, you might want to take one. If you have moderate symptoms, you take two. And if your symptoms are really severe, you take three. And for some women, their menopause symptoms happen mostly in the evening. So you can just take it in the evening. You take it when you have your symptoms the most, right? So maybe it's a little bit throughout the day, so you can split out the dose evenly throughout the day. So it's from 1 to 3 capsules a day.
Okay, that's really good to know. That's amazing. So for our listeners, I'm going to leave a link in the description with the link to the Platinum Naturals website that talks about that product a little bit more. And of course, you can come into store and talk to our supplement specialist to learn more about that product. But I have one more question for you. I just want to know if there's any other recommendations that you have for our listeners that could really help women move through menopause a little bit more smoother. And it could be literally anything.
Okay, so my advice is think about your lifestyle. There's lots of advice on the internet. You just have to make sure that the changes you make are sustainable for you, and always evaluate on an ongoing basis the changes you've made to make sure that it is helping you overall. So for some people, it's keeping a diary so that they can see that even taking MenoThrive, most people feel a difference in a week, but we've had people who say they had 60 hot flashes a day and after a month had 3. So it's keeping that diary to make sure the changes you've made are working for you, whether it's a dietary change, physical activity change, adding a supplement. It's also a good time to start taking a multivitamin, because as you're going through these changes and you're making dietary changes, you need to make sure that you don't have gaps in your diet. And a multi is a good way to ensure that these gaps are being closed. And my last bit of advice is don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, making these changes that are best for you. And maybe, up until you reach menopause, you weren't so concerned about your what you were eating or what your physical activity was. But now is a really critical time to do that. So don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. It's a wonderful journey, and you just improve your quality of life.
Yes, those are all really, really great points. And I love that, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because as we've talked about in this entire episode, it's so different for everybody. You're not going to have the same journey with anybody. And it's also not going to happen at the same rate for, say, your neighbor or your sister or your mother. So be patient with this transition of your life. Document it as much as possible, and stick with some of those changes. Give yourself a good 1 to 3 months making those lifestyle or supplement choices or dietary habit choices to really see a difference. Stick with it. And then again, making sure that whatever you are sticking with is something that's sustainable. So that's really, really great. And as for the multivitamin, that's a really, really great point. Filling in those gaps, really important. And actually, Platinum Naturals, you guys have the best multivitamin. It's our top selling multivitamin at Joanne's Place because it is so well rounded. And again, it's in that omega suspension that increases the absorption, gives you that extra boost of omegas. It's just a phenomenal formula. It's one of our JP essentials. So if you're wondering about what multivitamin to look at, I will leave that in the description for the name. You can also pop into one of our Joanne's Place locations to learn more about those multivitamins, as well as the new Meno Thrive by Platinum Naturals. So Dr. Mary Nagai, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. You've shared so much information with our listeners. I really appreciate it. And I know that there's going to be a lot of women that are listening to this that are also very grateful for your knowledge. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share this information with you and your customers.
Absolutely. Quick disclaimer here, any information shared on the Wellness on Purpose podcast is not intended to treat, diagnose, or for the prescription of any medication. Please contact your healthcare professional before use and for further information. If you're still here, thank you so much for tuning in today's episode. If you want to learn more about the topics that we covered in today's episode, as well as the products, you've got two options. You can head over to our Joanne's Place website to review the show notes. We'll leave that in the description below. Or you can pop into one of our Joanne's Place locations and talk to one of our amazing staff. Just a reminder, if you haven't already, go over to your preferred platform, follow our page, and then find us over on social media so you're notified as soon as a new episode is released. That's all for now, and we'll see you in the next episode.